Hey guys, this is Steve with TronicsFix. Today we're gonna disassemble the NES Classic Edition as well as the original Nintendo NES so we can compare the hardware. We're also gonna have a look inside the controllers and see what's the same, what's different. Obviously, the NES Classic Edition is super tiny, so I'm excited to see what the difference is between the motherboard on this and the motherboard on this. It looks fun, so let's get to it. Okay, we're gonna start with the original Nintendo NES console. I'm going to be using a Phillips Zero screwdriver. I'll put a link in the description below so you can purchase that if you need to. And for the NES Classic Edition, which I'll be tearing down next, I'm using a Phillips Double Zero, and I'll link that up as well. And then just a dental pick, and I can link that up as well. So the first thing we're going to do for the original NES is we're going to remove this screw, this screw, this screw, this screw, this screw, and this screw. And then there's also two other screws right here we'll remove. Okay, so we've got the top case off. And now it's time to just have a quick look inside. So this is the part where you plug the game in right here. This was the part on the original NES that was always getting a bad connection and you get like the blinking red light and that sort of thing. So the next thing we're going to do is actually take the internals apart and have a look at this motherboard. Okay, now all the screws are off of this, and so what we need to do is kind of wiggle it around a little bit and we can get it to come out from this carrier right here. So we will set this aside. Now we have a little bit better look at the motherboard. Now we're going to remove the rest of the insides. We're going to need to remove this screw, this one, this one, this one. There's one right down here we'll need to remove. This screw, and this screw. And then that'll enable us to pull this unit out. Now our motherboard is loose, so we're going to remove the motherboard out of the rest of the unit. We have to disconnect some connections, and then it'll be free so we can have a look at it. Okay, and now this is free. We're going to remove the metal plate. And that gives us a look at the motherboard for the original Nintendo NES. So that's the front. This is the underside, and then we have our connections over here. So now let's disassemble the NES Classic Edition and compare it to this motherboard. Now to tear down the NES Classic, what you want to do is remove these feet first of all, and then this little screw right here. So I'm going to be using a dental pick to remove the feet. So we'll just get our pick in there and get the feet off. And as you'll see down in there, there's a screw down there. So there's those 4 screws that hold the bottom case on. So now we have the 4 feet removed. Now we're going to remove the screws using a PH00 screwdriver, and I'll link it up in the description below. Okay, now that those screws are removed, we'll remove the front, the top case. And there we have it. So that is a look at the inside of the NES Classic Edition. Now we're going to remove the screws from this top plate so we can get the motherboard out. There are just 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I have those removed. So now we will remove this. Now it is sticky because it does have a large thermal pad here, and that's to keep the main chip cool on the board. And that gives you an idea of what the inside looks like. I do want to go ahead and remove the whole board so we can compare it to the original NES, so that's what I'll do next. And now we have the ribbon cable removed, this cable and this cable is removed, so now we just have one more screw right here. And now the motherboard will come out. So there we have it. There's the back side and there's the front side. So let's compare the sizes of the NES Classic Edition versus the original NES. So here we have it. This is the original NES, and this is the NES Classic Edition. So not only does this have everything that this has in it to make it work, but this also comes preloaded with 30 NES games. So that's pretty amazing difference between technology from the old system versus the new system. I'll turn it over and give you guys a look at the backside, just out of curiosity. So there we have the motherboards. Now we're gonna disassemble the controllers. First, we'll disassemble the controller for the original NES. It's just the 6 screws on the bottom. And I'm using the Phillips 00 again for this. Now that all 6 screws are loose, we can lift the back cover off. And here we have the internals of the NES original controller. Now I'll slowly and carefully lift this off so we can see the inside. So there we have the inside. And I'll remove the cable. Here we go, the inside of the original NES controller. You can see it's just got the button pads here, and then it's got one main chip right here, and then of course the cable connections. So now it's time to compare this to the NES Classic Edition. And as I said, I will be using my Phillips 00 again, linked in the description below. Now that these 6 screws are loose, we'll remove the back cover. Oh, yeah, there we go. And there's a look. So we have that. Now what I'm going to do is just pull the motherboard completely out. Now you can see it's got the same kind of configuration to keep the cable from pulling on this connector, so that's why it wraps around these pins right here. So we'll remove that. We'll pull out the motherboard. And here we go. So here we have the NES original controller motherboard, and here we have the NES Classic Edition. They're actually fairly similar in the cutout of the board, and even the button configuration on the motherboard is actually fairly similar. Obviously this one has a much smaller chip on it. We can turn it over, and this is the chip on the original, and this is the chip on the new Classic Edition. So that gives you guys a rundown of the differences in the controllers for the NES Classic Edition versus the original NES. And here's a view of the button pads. This is the original NES, and this is the NES Classic Edition. Button pads look similar. Obviously they are using a different material. I'm guessing probably a little bit better material on the NES Classic Edition since it's newer, but this material also looks like it's been holding up just fine. I haven't had any problems with the buttons or anything. So this shows you guys the difference between the button pads on the Classic Edition versus the original. Now I got to get this Classic Edition put back together so I can start it up and try out some of my favorite games. Thanks for watching.